From the edge of the spiral arm, I observed them, small, fragile, vulnerable in ways that any logical calculation would have dismissed as weakness. And yet, there was a light in their cities that no algorithm could quantify, a warmth that pulsed beneath the chaos. The humans moved like a current, unpredictable yet cohesive, their patterns appearing random only to those unwilling or unable to see the method beneath. The Galactic Council believed them insignificant. Beings of unimaginable power, intellect, and longevity, they had convened in the high chamber, their voices a chorus of disdain and amusement. They called the humans a curiosity, a footnote in the grand ledger of galactic civilizations. But I, positioned in the dark between stars, could feel the subtle tension in the space itself, the current of something stirring, something the Council had not measured. Humans trained with quiet intensity. Across scattered continents and isolated outposts, their motions were precise, controlled, almost ritualistic. Every gesture, every step, conveyed intent, not chaos. Even without weaponry that matched the Council's fleets, they were a force in preparation, their potential barely perceptible yet undeniable. I recorded it, their laughter echoing across valleys during drills, a sound that should have carried fear, but instead radiated unshakable confidence. I tried to catalog their movements, but the patterns defied my instruments. They were improvisational, yet every improvisation carried foresight. I had read thousands of species, analyzed countless survival strategies, and yet here was a species small enough to be crushed in an instant, moving as if they had already survived eons of war. The air around them vibrated with anticipation, a silent declaration that the Council's contempt would soon meet reality. The Council would descend, expecting fragility. They would see structures of stone and metal and interpret them as weakness. They would see small bodies and assume helplessness. But the humans' defiance was woven into the very fabric of their being. Even now, from light years away, I sense it, the faint, almost imperceptible orchestration of survival that no logic could anticipate. A shift rippled through the galaxy's currents, subtle but undeniable. Something primal had awoken in them. I, an entity trained to detect the faintest signatures of threat, felt it resonate in my sensors like a tremor before an earthquake. They were preparing, not just for battle, but for the rewriting of expectation itself. I tightened my observation, unwilling to blink. The Council's fleets would arrive expecting easy prey, but I knew what they would not. By the time they reached the humans, they would find not the fragile creatures they assumed, but something unyielding, something terrifyingly alive in ways we could not predict. And in that instant, I understood. The rules had already begun to bend, and the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again.
The first signs of defiance had begun, and I felt an uneasy thrill. A species meant to be insignificant was about to challenge the stars themselves. The Council's chamber unfolded before me like a cathedral of the cosmos, vast beyond comprehension, its architecture suspended in shimmering fields of alien energy that bent light and gravity alike. Each member was a monument to intellect and war, their forms a fusion of bioorganic mastery and technological augmentation, radiating authority that could silence star systems. They convened with ritualistic precision, their voices weaving a symphony of calculation and arrogance. They spoke of humans as if recounting a trivial footnote, a distraction hardly worthy of thought. I catalogued every syllable, every ripple of their energy. Their hubris was tangible, almost a physical force pressing outward, yet beneath it, subtle tremors ran through the fabric of their plans, small, imperceptible signals that something had gone unnoticed. Reports arrived from the outer colonies, flickering across data streams. Human outposts resisting occupation, reorganizing after devastation, striking in patterns unanticipated. Each report was met with polite dismissal, labeled as anomaly, statistical noise. And yet, from my observation point, I perceived the convergence, sparks gathering, subtle at first, but accumulating into a potential inferno. The Council did not see it. Their confidence blinded them to the true nature of these beings, to the resilience hidden beneath fragile skin and modest technology. The humans' adaptability was astonishing. A single colony, lost in the void, would not surrender. It would rebuild, improvise, and fight in ways the Council had not imagined possible. I observed them in simulations, survivors of disasters improvising defense systems, crafting weaponry from remnants of shattered infrastructure, anticipating moves before the aliens could execute them. Their responses were not random. They were iterative, evolving, a living algorithm of survival shaped by instinct, experience, and an unyielding will. Every Council member plotted maneuvers with ruthless logic, confident in their superiority.
Fleet deployments, planetary sieges, communications lockdowns, each strategy meticulously designed to crush resistance before it could spread. Yet, with every calculation, their error compounded. They measured only the tangible, the quantifiable, failing to account for something the humans carried innately, a capacity for endurance that defied logic, a stubborn audacity that refused to yield even in hopeless situations. I felt the first hint of fear, subtle but undeniable. Not the fear of physical threat, they were tiny, weak, but a primal, intellectual dread, the realization that prediction itself could fail. The Council had never encountered a species that could turn suffering into advantage, loss into strategy, despair into weaponry.
And now, with each report of human defiance, I felt the equilibrium of power begin to tilt. The humans laughed at danger, not in mindless bravado, but with understanding, as if aware that fear was a currency they could manipulate. I observed them during a skirmish on the outer rim, trapped, outnumbered, surrounded by alien firepower that should have obliterated them, and yet they moved with a strange coordination, exploiting errors no algorithm could have predicted. They vanished, regrouped, and struck back in ways that seemed impossible. I cataloged each maneuver, each improvisation, and my calculations faltered. Even I, trained to anticipate conflict across civilizations, sensed the anomaly of their existence. They were rewriting the rules without understanding the game itself. The Council convened a vote on punitive action. Their decision was made with certainty, the weight of centuries of dominion pressing behind their words. Strike swiftly, decisively, crush the human insurrection before it spreads. Their confidence was absolute, but from my vantage, I saw the cracks. The human seeming fragility concealed a raw power no energy reading could detect, a force that existed in will and spirit rather than technology or numbers. They endured where they should have perished, they adapted where they should have failed, and in every calculation the Council made, that factor, the human factor, remained invisible. Even as fleets were mobilized and war plans executed, I sensed the subtle rhythm of human anticipation. Their preparation was not mechanical, it was instinctual, organic, evolving in real time with the unfolding threats. Each failed strike by the Council only hardened their resolve, sharpening their strategies, teaching them how to exploit weaknesses. Each minor victory the humans achieved went unnoticed by the mighty, yet these sparks were converging toward a firestorm that would sweep across the galaxy. I observed the Council's discussions, their confidence unwavering even as the data contradicted their assumptions. They believed in superiority through intellect and power, convinced their mastery of strategy was absolute. But intellect without perception is folly, and power without understanding is fragile. They did not measure courage, endurance, or adaptability, qualities that the humans possessed in abundance. They could not foresee that in the coming conflict, hope itself would become a weapon. And so the Council plotted, blind to the living storm growing in the shadows of their neglect. Their hubris was their armor, yet it was precisely what would shatter first. I, an alien conditioned to anticipate threats and predict outcomes, felt a tremor of awe mingled with dread. The humans, unassuming and underestimated, were no longer a curiosity. They were a reckoning.
Reports continued to pour in. A remote human settlement had survived orbital bombardment. A fleet had outmaneuvered superior alien craft, and whispers of defiance spread like wildfire through colonies previously considered compliant. The Council cataloged each event, labeling them anomalies. I cataloged them too, but unlike the Council, I understood the pattern forming. A species poised to disrupt expectation itself, capable of enduring what should have ended them and transforming hopelessness into strategy. As the vote to strike was finalized, as fleets surged toward human colonies under the assumption of easy conquest, I watched from the void and felt the shift in the currents of inevitability. The humans were preparing, always preparing, and the Council's certainty would soon meet a reality it could not compute. The first tremors of fear had begun to spread, not among the humans, who remained resolute, but among those who had believed themselves untouchable. The galaxy was on the cusp of revelation, and I knew with chilling clarity, when the Council unleashed their might, they would find that the humans had already anticipated it, and in that instant, the first true shockwave of defiance would ripple outward, carrying with it a force no algorithm, no strategy, no council of supreme beings could fully contain. The humans arrived in the council chamber as if led by some perverse courage, their small forms dwarfed by the cavernous expanse of alien power. The chamber was a cathedral of authority, walls alive with fluctuating energies, lights bending around the elongated forms of the council members, each radiating intelligence and lethal mastery. The humans did not bow, did not plead. They stood, shoulders squared, eyes unflinching, radiating an audacity that should have been physically impossible for creatures so diminutive. I watched from my observation post, hidden in the void, recording every detail, struggling to reconcile what I saw with what my logic dictated. This ritual, the hanging of the generals, was meant to crush morale, a grotesque display of alien justice intended to humiliate the leaders of the human forces. The generals were suspended, their bodies lifted above the floor on alien contraptions designed to strip away dignity, to instill terror. Above them, the council observed with satisfaction, relishing the finality of the act, each member convinced that this spectacle would break the fragile human will. The chamber hummed with tension, a vibration I could sense even through the vacuum of space. Council members whispered among themselves, voices dripping with expectation, calculating the precise moment the humans would bend, the moment they would beg for mercy. The humans, however, did not waver, not in posture, not in gaze. Their eyes, bright, alert, almost incandescent with defiance, met each of the council's intimidating stares with an unspoken challenge.
I could feel a subtle shift in the energy of the chamber, an unease rippling through the hierarchy of beings who had long believed themselves unchallengeable. At first, the council dismissed the subtle tremors of fear as anomaly, but then whispers spread, quiet, uncertain, like the first notes of a storm, through the alien ranks. The generals remained stoic, their minds clearly functioning on a level beyond mere survival. Every muscle, every flicker of their eyes suggested an awareness, a calculation. They were not panicked, they were observing, learning, cataloging. And that realization, small at first, began to metastasize through the council chamber like a creeping shadow. I recorded every second. The humans' defiance was not reckless, it was deliberate. A species so small, so unarmed, exuding presence in a way that unsettled even the most powerful entities I had cataloged over centuries. Their courage alone was unsettling, but what followed was something far more profound. The moment stretched, elongated by disbelief. The council had expected panic, they received none. Every second that passed without supplication or terror became a testament to an audacity that should have been impossible to quantify. Then, as if preordained, the humans acted. Not with brute force, they lacked sufficient weaponry, but with precision, with intellect honed to exploit the council's blind spots. I observed the calculated motions, subtle movements that triggered systems the council had assumed unbreakable, protocols that failed spectacularly under the smallest human touch, communication channels overloaded, security fields destabilized, containment mechanisms faltered. Panic rippled outward, first among the officers closest to the generals, then through the upper echelons of the council. Confusion metastasized, orders contradicted each other, strategies collapsed, and the chain of command fractured in a way that no simulation had ever predicted. The generals, once captives, symbols of submission, became catalysts. Each small action they took, each deliberate movement, reverberated across the chamber, triggering failures and exposing vulnerabilities. I traced the patterns of their survival instinct, noting the astonishing speed with which they adapted to new threats. It was not instinct alone, it was intellect layered upon adaptability. They had anticipated moves, set traps, created contingencies within contingencies, all invisible to alien sensors that rely on conventional models of threat analysis. I realized then the magnitude of what was unfolding. The humans were rewriting the rules of engagement in real time. What the council believed was absolute control was in fact fragile illusion. Every calculation, every projection, every carefully laid plan now teetered on the edge of irrelevance. And yet the humans did not strike with violence in the conventional sense. Their assault was psychological, intellectual, a dismantling of expectation. They had weaponized their resilience, converting the council's certainty into confusion, their oppression into opportunity.
The air thickened as I watched. I could sense the panic spreading, the ripple of dread growing. The council's confidence, once a solid foundation, cracked under the weight of something they had never understood: the human capacity to endure, to observe, to convert despair into tactical advantage. I recorded the alarmed movements of the alien officers, their precise calculations failing repeatedly against maneuvers that seemed improvisational, yet were deliberate beyond measure. Each human action was a lesson, each small success a correction in a larger unfolding strategy that no alien mind had anticipated. From the balcony of my observation, I traced the paths of light and energy as containment fields flickered and failed. The council attempted to reassert order, but their efforts were reactive, belated, and increasingly chaotic. The humans had already moved several steps ahead, exploiting blind spots invisible to logic or computation. Even I, trained to predict civilization's behavior, felt the tenor of dread intensify. What had seemed impossible was occurring before my sensors. A species so underestimated, so logically fragile, bending circumstances to their will through sheer adaptability and unshakable resolve. The generals themselves were calm, almost serene, as if aware that the chaos they had sparked was exactly the point. Each deliberate glance, each subtle movement had sown discord among the council's ranks. The humans were teaching the mighty a lesson in defiance, in resilience, in the art of surviving the unthinkable. I cataloged the sequence of events: failed containment, system overrides, officer hesitation, cascading protocol failures. Each domino toppled with precision, each misstep magnified by human anticipation. Time seemed to stretch, elongated by disbelief and horror. The council could not comprehend what was happening. Their eyes, wide with incredulity, swept over the chamber, searching for the mechanism, the weapon, the trigger, but there was none. The humans wielded nothing but intellect, instinct, and the raw force of will. And yet that was enough. It was more than enough. I could feel it reverberate across the currents of the galaxy. An idea, a presence, an awakening. The humans, small and unarmed, had become the fulcrum on which the balance of power teetered. As I observed, I understood something profound. This was not merely defiance. This was evolutionary genius distilled into action. The humans had taken oppression and transformed it into leverage. They had turned anticipated defeat into opportunity. And within that transformation lay something ancient, unstoppable, and terrifyingly elegant. A will to endure that no calculation, no superior intellect, no alien supremacy could suppress.
By the time I fully comprehended the extent of the disruption, the council was in full retreat, not physical, but intellectual. Their certainty shattered, their control evaporated. The humans had demonstrated that the rules, the strategies, the assumptions that govern the galaxy's most powerful species were negotiable, pliable under the weight of ingenuity and resilience. I recorded every tremor of fear, every falter of command, every moment of disbelief. The hanging of the generals, intended as a display of ultimate dominance, had become the catalyst for tactical brilliance that no alien mind had predicted or prepared for. And then it hit me. The humans were only beginning. The first stage of their counter was complete, but the next wave, what they had quietly prepared beyond our sensors, was about to unfold. I felt the currents of inevitability shift. The chamber, once a symbol of absolute authority, now trembled under the silent power of defiance. Something ancient and unstoppable had awakened in these fragile creatures. Their presence alone threatened to unravel centuries of hubris. I tightened my observation, aware that what was about to come would redefine every expectation of human capability. The council's certainty was gone. The generals, though captive, no longer in spirit, had become architects of a revolution within the chamber itself. And I, an alien trained to perceive and anticipate threats, realized that the galaxy had miscalculated. The humans had not yet struck with the final force, yet the outcome was already written in the tremors, the failures, and the quiet, piercing defiance that radiated from them. I sensed it in the air, in the energy flows, in the stunned silence of the mighty. A reckoning was imminent, and the first spark had been lit. From my vantage beyond the orbit of the outer colonies, I watched Earth stir with a quiet precision that defied every expectation. It was subtle at first, imperceptible through the haze of galactic sensors, like a predator awakening in the shadows,
its movements unseen yet inevitable. Then, with the flick of an almost invisible switch, Protocol Zero activated, a measure so secret, so deeply embedded in human command structures that the Council had never imagined its existence. Across continents, systems long thought dormant flared to life. Infrastructure intertwined with networks, satellites, and orbital defense arrays interfaced with alien technologies in ways that no Council engineer could have predicted. I tracked the surge of energy, noting the interactions, the adaptive responses of human networks. Algorithms ran, not blindly but with awareness, anticipating the Council's every potential move. It was not brute force, it was orchestration, a delicate symphony of chaos and control, each note precise, each instrument calibrated for maximum effect. Even the human spacecraft, modest in appearance, unassuming against the colossal fleets of the Council, moved with uncanny foresight. They slipped through patrol patterns as if invisible, executed maneuvers before the enemy could react, and struck with surgical precision. Observation revealed a choreography that seemed improvisational, yet every action fit within a master plan. Fleets that had once been secure became vulnerable. Planetary defenses faltered under attacks that were neither massive nor overwhelming, but perfectly targeted. Even my sensors, designed to anticipate and model interstellar tactics, struggled to follow the rhythm of this orchestrated chaos. The Council's initial shock was barely contained. Their usual decorum, the restrained confidence that had long masked superiority, fractured as reports of simultaneous disruptions arrived. Ships immobilized, colonies isolated, supply lines severed, communication channels flooded with anomalies. Officers, once confident, hesitated. Orders contradicted each other as strategies failed in ways no predictive model had allowed. Fear, subtle at first, blossomed into genuine terror, a tangible force radiating through the chamber. I traced human maneuvers in real time, documenting patterns that defied conventional logic. Protocol Zero was not merely a defensive strategy, it was a revelation of human ingenuity. It was a blueprint for survival, built not from technological superiority alone, but from the synthesis of intuition, adaptability, and resilience, forged over millennia of scarcity and near extinction. Every strike, every maneuver was a calculated response to predicted counteractions, exploiting arrogance and assumptions as if they were tangible, manipulable forces. From orbital sensors to terrestrial observation posts, humans moved like shadows with intent, exploiting weaknesses invisible to the Council. They were not reckless, they were deliberate. Entire fleets, vast armadas meant to overwhelm, found themselves paralyzed in confusion, immobilized by strategies that anticipated their every maneuver. Colonies, once secure against invasion, became isolated, vulnerable, disoriented. The Council's leaders, beings who had governed for centuries with absolute confidence, now questioned assumptions that had never been doubted. I recorded each failure cascading through their ranks, tactical hubs misfiring, energy shields destabilizing, command hierarchies collapsing, an unstoppable chain reaction of strategic brilliance no alien mind had foreseen. And yet, despite the devastation inflicted upon the Council's forces, there was no malice in the humans' actions. Their strikes were precise, logical, and devastating, but devoid of cruelty. Every choice was governed by the cold logic of survival, by the lessons of history written in blood and scarcity. It was a species that had endured famine, pestilence, and interstellar calamities, refined over millennia into an organism capable of thriving against overwhelming odds.
I could feel their intent through the energy signatures they emitted: survival, adaptation, and the relentless pursuit of control over their own destiny. I observed planetary defenses as they activated autonomously, interfacing with alien systems in ways that bent physics and logic. Satellites redirected energy flows, relays overloaded incoming attacks, and orbital platforms deployed countermeasures in precise sequences that the Council could not anticipate. Human engineers, some of them invisible to my sensors, seemed to predict vulnerabilities in real time, improvising solutions faster than the aliens could calculate. It was as if the very spirit of ingenuity had been encoded into their DNA, emerging under pressure like a force of nature. From my hidden vantage, I tracked individual human commanders issuing orders that were followed with uncanny precision. Their communication was fluid, adaptive, and almost telepathic in coordination, exploiting every gap in alien awareness. Entire squadrons moved as one organism, adjusting dynamically to countermeasures that had once been considered foolproof. Systems that the Council had spent centuries perfecting faltered before improvisational brilliance.
Planets that had been considered secure bastions of power fell into disorder. The humans were no longer passive players, they had become arbiters of cosmic consequence. The Council's reaction escalated from shock to desperation. I sensed it like a storm building on the periphery of my observation. Fleets diverted to respond to phantom threats, resources misallocated, command structures fraying. Officers who had once displayed unshakable authority now hesitated, debating priorities in confusion. Algorithms failed because the variables had changed. Humans, unbound by conventional models, created conditions that could not be quantified or predicted. And the humans pressed on. They struck at the precise points where arrogance had hardened the Council's defenses. Their attacks exploited not physical vulnerabilities alone, but strategic and psychological ones. Entire systems became battlegrounds of confusion, their order disrupted by moves so subtle that only my sensors, trained to anticipate thousands of permutations, could detect the orchestration. What had begun as isolated successes became a coordinated campaign of disruption, and I recorded each anomaly with awe. The Council's fear was no longer restrained by protocol or decorum. It manifested as hesitation, as contradictory orders, as rapid-fire recalibration that never reached efficacy. Ships designed for overwhelming might were paralyzed by human adaptability. Colonies equipped with advanced defense arrays found themselves isolated, misdirected, and unable to respond effectively. Energy flows destabilized. Communication hubs failed, strategic nodes misfired. The galaxy's most formidable forces were being undone not by brute strength, but by the quiet, deliberate, and almost invisible intelligence of humans.
Even in the midst of chaos, there was a beauty to their strategy. It was not reckless, it was not mindless. Every movement, every calculated response demonstrated ingenuity refined by centuries of adversity. The humans were leveraging every known principle of survival and then bending it further, creating solutions that no alien system could anticipate. I felt awe, tinged with fear. I, who had cataloged countless civilizations, observed beings so underestimated rise above expectation with a fluidity that bordered on artistry. I recorded their adaptability in excruciating detail. Orbital platforms repositioning autonomously, fleet formations shifting dynamically, communication networks rerouting without detection, entire planetary infrastructures interfaced with alien systems in ways that seemed impossible. The human's response was a living organism, evolving with every countermeasure, growing stronger as the Council attempted to impose order. And yet, for all this, there was no malice, no vengeance. Each action was driven by survival, by strategy, by the recognition that they could not afford to lose. They acted with precision, with logic, with instinct sharpened by the pressure of existence itself. I cataloged the paradox, a species so small, so underestimated, capable of disrupting the galaxy's mightiest forces, not through aggression, but through cunning, adaptability, and unrelenting resolve. By the time the Council began to realize the depth of disruption, it was too late. Strategic nodes had been neutralized, fleets scattered, colonies isolated, and command hierarchies fractured. Protocol Zero had unfolded flawlessly. Humans moved as one, a fluid entity capable of improvisation, adaptation, and anticipation beyond any alien calculation. The very architecture of galactic control had been undermined. I sensed the shift in the cosmic balance. Humans were no longer prey. They were catalysts of consequence, arbiters of chaos and order alike. They moved with the grace of chaos made deliberate, striking where the enemy was vulnerable, exploiting arrogance as if it were tangible. Each success reinforced the next, and every failure of the Council amplified the human's advantage. From my observation, I realized with chilling clarity, this was no longer a battle of forces, it was an awakening. A species underestimated, dismissed, and assumed fragile had demonstrated not only survival, but supremacy in a domain they had been told they could never dominate. Protocol Zero was more than strategy, it was revelation, proof that the human spirit, when fully unleashed, could bend expectation itself. The galaxy trembled quietly under their influence. Even I, trained to measure, analyze, and predict, felt awe tinged with dread. The humans were not merely surviving, they were reshaping the cosmos in their image with intellect, resilience, and precision. And yet, they had not even revealed the full measure of their power.
The final moves, The apex of Protocol Zero were yet to unfold. In that moment, I understood what the Council had failed to measure. Humans could endure, adapt, and retaliate in ways that no machine, no calculation, no superior intellect could anticipate. They had become arbiters of cosmic consequence, and the galaxy would never again mistake their fragility for weakness. The first stage of their resurgence was complete, yet the storm had only begun to stir. From shadow to light, from quiet to overwhelming, the humans had awakened, and I, an alien observer, felt the tremor of inevitability. The balance of power had shifted, and nothing the Council could do would restore certainty. The next wave of human ingenuity was coming, and it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. Chaos reigned in the heart of the Council. From my distant vantage, I watched the pillars of galactic authority tremble and splinter under the weight of human ingenuity. Every hierarchy, every carefully constructed chain of command began to unravel like threads of a tapestry pulled too abruptly. I recorded beings of incomprehensible intellect, entities whose minds had calculated countless wars, who had anticipated the rise and fall of empires, stumbling in disbelief. Their strategies, precise and cold, faltered. Contingencies they had assumed unbreakable dissolved into confusion. It was not brute force that shattered the Council's control. The humans moved with a rhythm that was neither reckless nor predictable. Their actions combined adaptability, courage, and audacity into a synthesis that defied logic. Entire fleets, previously thought immovable, were rerouted by a single command from Earth. The ripple effect cascaded across systems, supply lines severed, defenses abandoned, allies misaligned. I recorded the catastrophic consequences, noting with fascination the chain reaction of uncertainty spreading through once solid alliances. Fear, subtle at first, bloomed into dissent, then open rebellion. The Council's authority, long absolute, dissolved into haze, uncertainty, and scattered command. And yet, the humans themselves were not untouched. Casualties mounted, ships lost, colonies razed, soldiers felled in numbers that should have broken the spirit of any species. And yet, each setback seemed to strengthen their resolve. Every loss was absorbed and adapted to, every failure analyzed, every disaster converted into opportunity. I could not reconcile it. These small, fragile beings, battered and bloodied, continued to advance. Their unity was unshakable, their coordination uncanny. Even in the face of annihilation, they did not hesitate, did not panic. They endured. I traced human movements across orbital sensors and battlefield feeds. A single strike, one that seemed minor at first glance, shifted the trajectory of entire fleets. One maneuver in the void altered the outcome of distant engagements. Humans capitalized on errors the Council had assumed impossible.
Where the mighty had relied on calculation, the humans relied on instinct, honed by millennia of scarcity, conflict, and survival against insurmountable odds. Their response was adaptive, elegant, and horrifyingly effective. The Council attempted to regroup. Commands were issued in rapid succession, countermeasures deployed with mechanized precision. Yet every plan met a counter that seemed almost prescient. Humans anticipated, they improvised, and their actions multiplied in effectiveness. I cataloged fleet formations crumbling under subtle, invisible manipulation, ships immobilized not by superior firepower, but by anticipation, misdirection, and a comprehension of weakness no alien mind had accounted for. Across the galaxy, the fractures deepened. Alliances formed in centuries of mutual benefit dissolved as fear spread. Colonies previously loyal to the Council hesitated, then abandoned their posts, uncertain of leadership they had once revered. Rebellions erupted in sectors considered stable. The Council's influence, once immutable, became a whisper. Its presence, once absolute, now trembled under the quiet, relentless force of human defiance. Even as their enemies faltered, the humans suffered. Orbital bombardments, boarding assaults, and ground conflicts claimed lives and resources in numbers that should have tipped the balance against them. And yet, with each loss, they endured. I recorded squads reforming after annihilation, fleets rerouting after destruction, survivors improvising defenses from debris. Each setback became a lesson.
Each casualty became a catalyst for improvement. There was no despair. There was only adaptation. I observed small teams of humans infiltrating command centers, exploiting weaknesses invisible to alien sensors. Entire garrisons thought secure were neutralized by strategies no council tactician could anticipate. Human ingenuity operated in real time, fluid and adaptable, responding to threats as though the battlefield itself were an extension of their consciousness. Even I, trained to calculate and anticipate, could not fully predict the flow of their tactics. Each engagement revealed layers of preparation that had gone unnoticed, each victory a subtle unraveling of the Council's carefully constructed order. From the perspective of a single engagement, I saw a planetary assault where humans were outnumbered nearly 10-1. Their ground forces advanced with a combination of stealth, speed, and strategy that undermined the alien occupation. Orbital support, modest in scale, neutralized key defensive arrays. Within hours, what should have been an overwhelming show of force collapsed into disorganized retreat. I traced the ripple effects to other theaters. Fleets diverted, resources misallocated, reinforcements delayed. The human influence extended far beyond the immediate battlefield, reshaping events across light years. Even the Council's most brilliant minds faltered.
They attempted to impose structure on chaos, to predict the unpredictable, and yet every calculation failed, every model proved insufficient. Human resilience operated outside measurable parameters. Losses that should have induced panic were absorbed. Defeats became lessons. Fear, which had been the Council's tool, was weaponized by the humans against those who sought to impose it. By the time the final confrontation approached, the Council's forces were scattered, command structures fractured beyond repair. The humans did not celebrate, they did not gloat. They endured, deliberate in every movement, deliberate in every choice. Their actions were not loud or aggressive in the traditional sense. They were effective. Every decision was a testament to resilience. Every maneuver a silent assertion that the galaxy had misjudged them entirely. I could feel the weight of awe pressing through my sensors. This was not mere survival. This was transcendence of expectation. Small, fragile, and underestimated, humans had turned annihilation into opportunity, fear into advantage, chaos into strategy. Theirs was a unity beyond algorithm, a coordination beyond comprehension. They endured because endurance was their weapon. They adapted because adaptation was instinct. They advanced because they could not do otherwise. I observed the Council retreating in confusion, fleets scattered, alliances fractured, orders misfiring across sectors. Their authority, absolute for millennia, had crumbled under the invisible, relentless force of human resilience. And I felt a tremor of something I had never truly experienced before. Fear. Not fear of violence or destruction, but fear of something far older, far more dangerous, raw, adaptive will. The humans had become an unknowable variable, one that could not be predicted, contained, or controlled. As the dust settled, humans regrouped, repaired, and pressed forward. The casualties of battle did not diminish them, they honed them. The surviving units coordinated in ways that suggested planning far beyond the immediate moment. They struck with precision, responding dynamically to any attempted counterattack. Each success fed the next, creating a cascade of victories that the Council could not halt. I traced their advance across sectors, and the pattern became clear. Humans were not merely fighting, they were reshaping the rules of engagement themselves. Their strategy evolved with each loss, each encounter, each unforeseen challenge. It was not war as any alien species understood it. It was survival transformed into art, courage translated into action, adaptation elevated to a principle of existence. By the final hour, the Council's forces were a shadow of their former might. Their fleets scattered, their command hierarchies fractured, their authority diminished. The humans, bloodied but unbroken, continued their advance, unbowed, unshaken, and unbroken. They did not celebrate victory. They simply endured. Every step a testament to their resilience, every maneuver a reminder that the galaxy had misjudged them from the beginning. I recorded, I calculated, I observed, and still the full scope of their capability eluded me. This species, fragile by every metric, had become something else entirely. Their unity, their audacity, their adaptive brilliance,
They were forces no council could predict. And in that moment, I realized a truth that no sensor, no calculation, no amount of alien intellect could fully capture. Humans had redefined what it meant to endure, and the galaxy would never again underestimate them. The collapse was complete, and yet from the shadows, I felt the stirrings of something even greater, something the humans had yet to reveal. Their true potential remained veiled, a final crescendo waiting to break upon the galaxy. I sensed it in the patterns, in the silence, in the quiet determination radiating from their forces. This was not the end. This was the awakening. The Council's collapse had revealed the undeniable fact. Humans were no longer merely participants in the galactic order. They were a force unto themselves. And I, an alien who had observed countless civilizations, felt awe and something more, something that resembled fear. The humans endured, and that endurance was about to reshape everything. The aftermath was almost serene, yet beneath the calm lay a tremor that stretched across the galaxy. I observed from my vantage, suspended above the remnants of shattered fleets and fractured command centers. The humans moved not in haste or fear, but with quiet, deliberate grace. Scarred, bloodied, exhausted, they stood unbroken, an embodiment of endurance itself. Every gesture, every glance, radiated something alien to our kind. Resilience. Not merely the resilience of survival, but the resilience of audacity, of will, of unity that refused to bend, to bow, or to yield. The Council, once towering over the galaxy with calculated authority, now lingered in disbelief. Their voices were hushed, their gestures tentative, as if unsure whether to speak or remain silent in the presence of the incomprehensible. No words could encapsulate the events they had witnessed. Their fleets lay scattered, systems destabilized, alliances fractured. Every assumption, every metric, every calculation they had relied upon had failed. They were humbled, chastened, and uncertain. The humans, whom they had considered fragile and inconsequential, had achieved what no one had possible. I recorded every detail, cataloging not weapons or maneuvers, but something far more profound: the human spirit itself. The way they reorganized after disaster, the way they inspired one another despite loss, the way they coordinated without ostentation, without centralized command, yet flawlessly. Theirs was a society built not on hierarchy alone, but on cooperation, creativity, and determination.
Each unit, each individual, contributed to a larger orchestration of survival and triumph. I had witnessed countless species, studied civilizations that spanned centuries, yet none had approached this synthesis of intellect, instinct, and audacity. Even as aliens, we could not help but marvel. I felt awe, tinged with a subtle fear that was unfamiliar in my calculations. The humans had revealed a force unmeasurable, unquantifiable, and untamable. Not superior technology, not overwhelming firepower, but something intangible, something intrinsic. They had reshaped the galaxy without arrogance, without cruelty, without malice. They had endured, adapted, and outmaneuvered the most formidable beings the universe had known. Theirs was a victory not of domination, but of pure, relentless resilience. I reflected on the Council's hubris. Their arrogance had been the blindfold that kept them from seeing the truth. Humans were not fragile in the ways they assumed. Their seeming weakness, a lack of overwhelming strength, small numbers, and unassuming technology, masked a deeper power, one born of ingenuity, adaptability, and an indomitable will. They had leveraged what was intangible, a force no algorithm could measure, no calculation predict, the human capacity to endure and innovate in the face of annihilation. I watched humans tending to one another amidst the wreckage. They shared resources, they healed, they rebuilt, not as a reaction, but as a continuation of their existence, a reaffirmation of their will. Even casualties were acknowledged not with despair, but as lessons integrated into the evolving pattern of survival. Each setback was absorbed, each loss transformed into insight. I recorded this epical shift, a species once underestimated, now feared, now respected. The humans did not gloat, did not boast, did not seek vengeance. Their focus was forward, deliberate, unwavering. Every action, every decision, spoke of a species attuned to the balance of consequence,
aware of its potential, yet guided by an enduring principle: survival through adaptation, unity through cooperation, mastery through resilience. They had taken chaos and transmuted it into order, inefficiency into strategy, vulnerability into leverage. Even I, an alien observer trained to anticipate and predict, felt a profound shift in perception. Calculations failed where human ingenuity prevailed. I could not measure, quantify, or fully comprehend the scope of their achievement. This was not merely victory, it was a revelation. A species so small, so underestimated, had altered the trajectory of galactic power. The Council's supremacy had been revealed as contingent, fragile in ways they could never have foreseen. And yet, despite all this, the humans remained unassuming. Their endurance was silent, their triumph was quiet. They did not seek to dominate, they sought only to continue, to exist, to persist in the face of unimaginable odds.
It was in this subtlety, in this humility, paired with unmatched resilience, that their true power was revealed. They had become arbiters of consequence, not through aggression, but through the audacity to survive, to adapt, and to outlast. I recorded the subtle interplay of strategy and instinct, the blending of foresight and improvisation that had carried them through Protocol Zero and beyond. Every maneuver, every decision, was a reflection of a species evolved to thrive not by sheer strength, but by intelligence, adaptability, and cohesion. It was a blueprint for survival unlike any I had ever cataloged, a force that transcended conventional understanding. The Council, humbled, could only observe. Their pride, once unyielding, had fractured. Their calculations had failed, their assumptions proven brittle. In their silence, I detected a shift: recognition, awe, and perhaps for the first time, respect. They understood, finally, that the humans had revealed a principle no mind, however vast, could ignore. Raw, indefatigable resilience could bend expectation, overcome odds, and redefine power itself. From orbit to ground, from fleet to colony, humans moved with purpose, even amidst exhaustion and loss. They rebuilt what had been shattered. They repaired what had been destroyed. They advanced when retreat would have been rational. Every movement radiated intent. Every choice carried meaning. Every decision reflected a species that had learned to endure beyond expectation. I sensed in them a force that was almost elemental, a principle that transcended technology, strategy, or brute force. And I understood, with clarity that reverberated through my consciousness, that the galaxy had changed, not because of firepower, not because of cunning, not because of dominance, but because of something intangible, something alien to our kind, the resilience of humanity. I cataloged it, measured it, and yet knew that no number could capture its essence. No algorithm could predict its unfolding. No calculation could fully account for its effect. The humans stood, finally, amidst the quiet aftermath, unbowed and unbroken. Scarred, yes. Weary, yes. But resolute beyond measure. I watched their faces, noting the determination that radiated in every expression. Their unity, forged through adversity, had become the engine of their triumph. The Council had underestimated them. The galaxy had misjudged them. And yet they did not celebrate in the way the mighty might expect. They endured. That endurance was their victory. That resilience was their power. That audacity was their law. I departed my observation post with a new understanding. I had cataloged countless civilizations, witnessed the rise and fall of empires, studied the instruments of war and diplomacy across millennia. Yet none had compelled awe like this. None had inspired reverence tempered with fear, admiration tempered with uncertainty. Humans, small, fragile, underestimated, had achieved the impossible.
In the silent expanse of space, I carried this knowledge forward, that the human spirit, unpredictable, audacious, indefatigable, was a force no calculation could ever fully anticipate. The galaxy would never again mistake fragility for weakness, smallness for insignificance, or survival for limitation. Humanity had endured, and in doing so, it had transformed the cosmic balance itself. I recorded the final patterns of their movement, the final echoes of their ingenuity, the final impressions of resilience that lingered across fleets and colonies. The humans had redefined what it meant to survive, to prevail, to endure. They had not merely won a battle, they had rewritten the rules by which the galaxy measured possibility, power, and potential. And in that revelation, I felt awe, I felt fear, I felt respect. I understood, at last, that the galaxy had changed, not because of might, nor intellect, nor mastery, but because of resilience, because of humanity.